Oh no. Bum 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 bum. Okay. Hopefully that will work. Hopefully. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. We shall see. We will see. We will see. Okay. There we go. Burning Crusade Classic. Yes, no. Tags, wow. Craft. PC. Save. Okay. Okie dokie, that should be okay, I guess, I hope. Oh, maybe I should tap out. Oh, wrong one. System. Sound background. Okay, return to game. Okay. Okie dokie, we're about to start going places, I guess, in just a minute. So don't worry. Do not worry. I'm gonna listen to the video while we stream. I don't know what I should watch or listen to. Work for more.
One Piece after 25 gosh dang years is finally coming to an end. We have entered the final saga, and Luffy will now have to face off against his greatest challenge yet.
Oh no.
Huh? No, not Buggy. Rather, I'm referring to the final antagonist of the series for over 800 years. Imu D. Judas. Who? Come on guys, you know, Im-sama, the Shadow King of the world, the leader of the Celestial Dragons and the 5 Elders. Yeah, well, she's a D. What? You know, I mean, has a D in her name.
I don't know. I think that's a bit dodgy, mate.
Oh, come on, I'm talking about the initials. Im-sama is from the family
Label
of D,
7.
but that's not all. Imu is not only a D, but was once a very close friend to none other than Joy Boy, who she backstabbed and betrayed, all for some magical tree. No, not that type of tree. Come on, guys.
That's good shit right there.
Now you guys taking the piss. Seriously, using our best Deep observation hockey, we have
Whoa,
figured out
we go
what
all the way
really
with the
happened
hockey.
in the Void Century, along with the hidden secrets behind the world government and what they don't want you to know. But first, I need to address something important. A lot of you guys have been asking,
Oh,
where do
no.
I read manga or where can I watch anime? Well, I'm here to tell you, you're asking the wrong question. You should be asking, what browser do I use? Have you ever wanted to watch anime whilst you play games? Don't you want to have your favorite waifu alongside you whilst you browse the internet? What about listening to music seamlessly? And do all
Sure.
of this without your games lagging
Oh
for
no.
free? Well, let me tell you guys about our sponsor, Opera GX. No other browser will let you customize your experience as much as Opera GX. You can pick special themes, wallpapers and colors, or just create something from
Oh, I
scratch
better
by
switch my
uploading your own
sponsor on.
background images. You can even pick out an animated wallpaper just like the Naruto one I have. One of the most amazing features of Opera GX is the video crop-out function. You can literally watch us on YouTube or even watch
shit.
anime whilst you play your favorite game.
Fudge
And with
monkeys.
Opera's special GX player, you
It's
can
too
listen
far
to
away.
your tunes whilst connecting to Spotify and Apple Music.
I might have
The
to run
best
back up
part is
to
it's
correct
super
stuff again.
easy
Oh
and
no,
quick to
failed
implement
attempt!
everything you did
What?
in your previous browser. Come on guys, don't miss out. Download Opera GX now. Check out the link in the description below. We first learnt about Imsama during the Reverie in chapter 906. Until this chapter, we all were led to believe that the highest authority in the world government were the Gorosei. However, even the 5 elders bowed down to Imsama as she sat upon the empty throne of the world, cementing herself as the leader of the government and the Marines.
Oh,
It's also
no.
revealed that Imsama is the dictator that decides the name of the light,
Whoa,
which needs to be
okay.
extinguished from history. Yeah, she basically gives hit commands here and there, you know, as she please, because she's the big bad boss. But the conspiracy don't stop there, as Imsama is shown in the basement chambers deep within the Pangaea castle, revealing a giant straw hat in the freezing cellar, whilst she has a poster of Luffy in hand. But things get even stranger when she goes to the room of flowers. She cuts apart Luffy and Blackbeard's poster whilst stabbing the photo of Shirahoshi whilst holding the picture of Vivi. But the important thing is the room of flowers Imsama is inside, because I believe that this room is where the Eve tree, whose roots provide air and light 10,000 meters below to Fishman Island, is located, whilst its branches light up the flower room in the Pangaea castle. Also, because of how Imsama is depicted from her stature and the way she behaves, I'm referring to her as a she. However, this is not a fact. It could easily be a he, you know, who knows.
We do not care.
But with the little information we have and using a Steve observation hockey, I'm here to tell you that we have indeed unlocked the secrets of the Void Century. But before we explain Imsama's betrayal, making her the Judas to Joy Boy and the people of D, let's first explain the will of D and who the people of D really are. We know from chapter 764, the people of D are those who challenge the gods, which in this world are the celestial dragons, though they have a negative outlook, obviously pushed by the celestial dragons themselves and of course the world government. But in reality, the clan of D are those who will bring the dawn of a new era. Now, chapter 763 was the ante revealed to Lord that those with this initial in their name are from the fated family of D. However, the term family has a lot of meaning. In the world of One Piece, Luffy, Ace, and Sabo are brothers, though they are not related by blood. Whitebeard was a father to his sons, and again, they are not related by blood. I can go on forever. Even Luffy and his crew are sort of a family. Likewise, with the family of D, there was a misconception that those with this initial in their names are all genetically related or once belonged to the same clan. But I'm here to tell you that's not the case. Rather, the D's were part of a group or crew who followed the Free King, Joy Boy, during the Void Century. Every one of them were like family. though they came from different places and belonged to different races. Some were giants, some were fishmen, some were Lunarians, and some were humans, so on and so forth. They were all the family of D under their captain Joyboy. This would also explain how Jaguar D Sol obtained the D initials even though he's a giant. Likely his forefather 800 years ago wasn't Joyboy's crew, or it could be that his ancestor got gigantified, but that's just a complete different story altogether. However, like in all families and crew, there is always one black sheep, or in this case, a Judas. Blackbeard is a representation of this. He is the Judas of Whitebeard's crew. My theory is that in Joyboy's time, there was a member of the crew who betrayed him and became the reason why the ancient Great Kingdom lost to the 20 allied kingdoms. Because of this, the promised meeting of Joyboy and Poseidon 800 years ago did not take place, so the mission to unify all races and the sea failed. This Judas is none other than Imu D. Judas. But before we get to how and why Imu betrayed Joyboy, let's recap a bit about Joyboy's goals.
Alright, let's go. I got 60 minutes. Well, I better check, make sure I don't. Thank God I checked.
Poseidon were considered sovereigns in their own rights. This was
Thank God I
by
checked.
Neptune of Fishman Island, and the Sea Kings who foretold the prophecies of their rebirth. Joyboy likely was a leader and seen as an idealized civilization of the ancient kingdom. Even if Shandora wasn't part of
I
the
like
ancient
that.
kingdom,
I like
just
that.
the
I
way
like
it
that.
was, Joyboy's influence stretched far and wide through the world. Like even the Lunarians, who were the residents of the Red Line, knew Joyboy and likely
supply
looked up
only
to
the
him,
finest
especially
goods. Hey
since
there.
Joyboy was the embodiment
Oh,
of the
Jesus.
warrior of
Hello.
liberation, Sun God
Want to broach
Nikar. He had the
goods?
power to make imagination into reality and help the world
Ooh,
with
ice
his
cold
unique
milk,
ability
boys
by
and
molding
girls.
and
Ice
shaping
cold
things
milk.
to his will. During the Void Century, there were multiple human kingdoms, along with other
Alright,
nations
we're
belonged
good to go
to
now.
different races. The ancient kingdom stood as the middle ground, an authority to prevent injustice and disharmony. Joyboy led the charge against any skirmishes between these territories. Some of the races believed they were superior over others and went on a hunt to cause harm. However,
no.
they would be forcefully stopped by Joyboy and his crew, the family of D. This would explain the legends of Nikar, but it doesn't stop there. We also know that Joyboy planned to use Poseidon and the ship Noah, which was built by an extinct clan, to move the people of Fishman Island to the surface. This reiterated the understanding of the will Joyboy had to bring the world together. Joyboy worked
Yes,
with the
he
Minx
did.
and the country of Wano, along with the
Yes,
giants
he
to
did.
make this dream come true. The dream where the world and the sea will be one piece.
can't
No
cast
boundaries and complete freedom to travel. A true harmonic
Ooh.
Joyboy had to put together and have them work
Nice.
as one unit. Because this plan
That's
had
right, I
a
do have
lot
my
of
wand too now,
hurdles.
so
Joyboy
I
needed
can
a
use the
way to
wand.
control the rampant Sea Kings, fix the crazy weather in the New World, and destroy the Red Line, which is where Poseidon, Pluton, and Uranus came into the picture. But most importantly, all of
nice.
this was only possible due to the advancement of the ancient kingdom and the social power they had on the world during that era. The ancient kingdom was a very advanced civilization. The robots had a clear understanding of government and harmony of the world.
Resist!
They
What?
also knew about the dangers such powers could
Okay,
possess.
I'm getting my
Almost
one up
like
there,
how
there
us
then.
in the real world have nukes, but don't use them to the fullest because we know the dangers. Although we do use nuclear
Sorry,
technology
guys.
in
Whoa, oh,
non-destructive
again.
ways. The evidence of this advancement can be seen through Homer's cover story, where he
Okay,
lands on
beautiful.
the moon only to find the ruins of an ancient city named Berka, where technology and architecture was highly advanced. From the paintings
Whoa.
on the wall, the city's history can also be deciphered. It was the home of the moon people, the ancestors of the Sky
Good
Kings
day
and
to you.
Shandorians.
See you
But
later.
one day, they
Can I help
left the
you?
moon and headed to the main planet,
See you
which is
around.
the One Piece
Wait, where's
world.
Princess?
However, they left their creation
Oh,
on the
she's
moon,
back there.
which are the
Gotcha.
robots creatures called automata. We don't know when this immigration did take take place. However, it was likely at least 1,100 years ago since the start of the story, because that's when the city of Shandora was prosperous. Basically, these robots and these advanced cities were built by the people of the ancient kingdom before they descended on the main planet. These ancients were the ancestors of the people with wings. When they first arrived to the world of One Piece, it's likely they were seen as angels or some godly divine entity. Later down the line, Joy Boy became one of their representatives. Yes, that means Joy Boy likely had a pair of wings himself. Regardless, these people harnessed the power of their technology and applied it to the nature of the planet. This brought forth the power of devil fruits and various types of tools, from dials to transponder snails. However, through the effort of the world's government and the millennial gap, the legends and myth got warped. Just like how the Skypians legends about sacrificing girls to please their god got warped. This also gives evidence to how Vegapunk is so advanced, as we know that one of the Automata fell to cut
Well,
off
okay.
island,
He
and
died
Vegapunk
fast.
was struck by curiosity, making his life mission to understand these technologies of the ancient people. This is also how his science is likely 500 years ahead of the rest of the world, because he peered into the past instead of the future for discovery. But coming back to Joy Boy and his mission, he united members from different countries into his crew, where one of them was Imu. After traveling the world with Joy Boy, Imu learned a lot about his civilization and what it had to give. Maybe she even fell in love with Joy Boy. But once they arrived at Fishman Island and then the country of the Lunarians, things were about to change. Lunarians
Okay.
and fish folks have a lot of things in common, but have you they were
Ooh, my one is finally starting to do some damage. Yeah, boys.
Well, it's all got to do with propaganda, my friend. You see, these two races had another thing in common, which was this tree. Sunlight
Why is my bags
Eve.
open?
Sunlight
No.
Eve is a gigantic tree that extends 10,000 meters from the ocean ground directly
to get
beneath the
closer.
red line and shoots up sitting on top of the red continent itself, which was of course inhabited by the Lunarians. You guys who had the notification bell on will already know the significance the Sunlight Tree Eve has in the world of One Piece, as we theorize that it played a part in growing devil fruits.
In One Piece, you need the Atom Tree to pollinate the Eve Tree to produce devil fruit.
But this tree also held the unique properties to absorb sunlight and transfer it to its roots, along with supplying air to the ocean floor through respiration. Below the sea level, the sea folk, to avoid persecution by the humans, found a haven under the red line because of this very tree. Whilst above the red line, Lunarians were the caretakers of this tree and worked closely with the ancient kingdom in preserving it. Through Emu's journey with Joy Boy, her new family of the D's, she became obsessed with its beauty and power. For Joy Boy's dream to bring the new dawn and
Ooh,
the
chest!
world, he would have had to destroy the red line, effectively killing this tree, as in that specific point would lie the red line.
Oh my
The
god, that
Lunarian
was
race
beautiful.
who lived on top of the red line
That
quickly
was
agreed with this
beautiful.
plan, as they were promised something greater in return. You guys see where I'm going, right? Emo, who believed this tree is more important than the unification of the world, made sure this didn't happen and came up with a way to avoid this. To stop Joy Boy's plan, she had to destroy the ancient kingdom. Through the shadows, she manipulated the leaders of the 20 Kingdom around the world, convincing them to form an alliance. Then they declared war on the ancient kingdom. Though the ancient kingdom was highly advanced, they didn't anticipate this betrayal. Due to Emu's closeness with Joy Boy and the family of D, she was able to gain the trust of Toki's father, who was the master of Zunisha, the gigantic elephant. Zunisha, who would usually
Ooh,
his master
another
let
beautiful
down his
70.
guard
I
and
love
defended
them at
him.
Fire
Once
Festival.
the Allied Kingdom attacked the ancient kingdom, Emu misinformed and tricked Zunisha into helping the Allied nations win. Though Joy Boy was defeated by his betrayal, he anticipated that his dream to bring the world together would come later down in the future. Either he or his contemporary had a power similar to Madame Sharky in foretelling the future. You know, we're talking about the balls deep prediction hockey. Joy Boy then, with the help of the Minx and the Wano country, left
Ooh,
on
killing
eclipse for
potion.
the future
Nice.
to see. This
They can always
showcased
come in
that
handy,
Joy Boy
maybe.
understood how Emu's mind worked and knew what to do in response. Having a deep understanding of hockey and Joy Boy imbued the will of his spirit into the devil fruit. Over 800 years
Ooh,
would wait
nice.
for the right time to choose its host, which we now know is Monkey D. Everything was timed perfectly as Joy Boy the use of his
Ooh.
observation haki was able to sense the presence of
It's
Poseidon
beautiful.
and when she would reappear. Luffy is 3 years older than Shirahoshi and obtained his devil fruit when he was 7. Shirahoshi was alive during this time, pushing things into motion. Featuring Joy Boy defeating the ancient people and having their side girl, the Eve Tree, all to themselves, what did Imu-sama do next? They rallied against the Lunarians, basically making them extinct because they were the caretakers of the Eve Tree, securing the Red Line and establishing Marie Joie atop the previously Lunarian. The world nobles decided to make Imu their god and king, as without Imu they would have probably lost to the ancient kingdom, plus Imu could, however, Imu-sama emerged from the shadows
Oh,
giving the world
nice.
the false sense that it was the kingdoms coming
Very
together
nice.
at the reverie where decisions are made, and the 5 elders are the final pedestal of the world government. Everyone believes that the throne of the world is kept empty, but if the people of the world read chapter 906, they will find out that Edo is the true shadow king of the world. This secrecy is there so that the nobles could portray that they got their victory without outside help, because if it's hard to believe that a celestial, a race of higher beings who can't even breathe air under Maria needed help from Imu's betrayal to defeat the ancient kingdom. Their high status
Oh, I need
would be
more
brought
gold
to
dust.
question immediately if this secret would be revealed. Under Imu, the world government was formed. The history of the world was changed, where they removed everything that didn't fit their narrative of the world before the regime started. This was, of course, to keep the other nations from learning the truth about how the world likely was better before the nobles and Imu took over, where now the world is actually being oppressed or given a false sense of freedom. But how is Imu-sama still alive to this day, where we see him in chapter 906 ABD? You guys are probably thinking, well, it's through the Ape Ape no Mi. As we learned in chapter 761, the Ape Ape no Mi has the power to turn a person immortal through the surgery where the user gives their own life away. This is why Doflamingo wanted the fruit so badly, and it's worth almost as much as the head of the Pirate King at 5 billion berries. The proof of this isn't Oda himself introducing this ability, and from reading these backward times, I know that Oda doesn't
Ooh,
use any
nice,
weapons.
double
This
eight.
Chekhov's gun has to be fired, especially since we are on the final saga of One Piece. The fruit's ability has to be used by law, or it will be used to support Imu's immortality, as look at the giant straw hat, which is most likely
Ooh,
century. If you guys enjoyed this
those
video, then
beautiful
go check out our
back-to-back
video
fruits right
on
there.
the devil fruits. We basically figured out how devil fruits are created, how the Adam and Eve tree fit into the entire puzzle, so go click on that.
I can't cast that yet.
The world's equilibrium cannot be maintained forever, and Noland almost broke the balance.
That's still recharging.
Roger was the one who when Noland would not but it's true. I think Noland would have made it to last. The reason he was killed was because he wasn't. So let's talk about why Noland could have been the main character of One Piece. And if you're new to my channel,
Ooh,
the way
okay.
I view the world is by making connections. So let me connect you to my vision, the Par vision. Noland defied the Skypian god Kashigami, and maybe the series of unfortunate
Did I-
events that
no,
followed
not
after
yet.
could be seen
I
as
still
an
need
act
more
of God
gold dust.
retaliating against Noland, but it wasn't random. See, Noland went to Jaya on an exploratory mission but ended up executing a god and liberating a land oppressed by a false belief in an illusionary god, not realizing he returned to a world oppressed by a much more insidious power. In a way, Noland believed in the wrong gods and would have lived if he were a pirate. Let's take a look at his more successful counterpart, Roger. I think Oda purposely gave us the direct comparison of Noland to Roger. They had a lot of the same attitudes in terms of adventure. In a lot of ways, Roger was more of an adventurer than a pirate. If we were to boil things down, Noland was a really strong botanist with a boat, and Roger was a really strong geologist with a boat. It's funny because at the end of the day, Roger was just a guy looking for rocks. And at the end of this video, I want to lay out a really funny parallel between Roger and Noland that's based off of my Mad Tail video that I put out earlier this week. But continuing with more of the parallels, Roger became a world famous pirate and Noland was a world famous adventurer. Both of them, by the end of their stories, were executed in their hometown, where both of them were forever imprinted on the history of the world. technically
Very
neither of them
nice.
died because none of them were forgotten. More than the surface level parallels, both of their descendants suffered the same way. Cricket and Ace both were incredibly burdened by their family history. Both of them lived to overturn the legacies left by their ancestors in a certain way.
Nice.
Both Ace and Cricket were bullied in their youth about their ancestry, directly and indirectly, which forced them both to set sail to make their own legacy. But Ace, at the end of the day, wanted to make someone else the Pirate King to overwrite the history of the first Pirate King, Roger, whereas Cricket wanted to overturn the popularized story of Nolan to prove that he was right, not because he was doing it for Nolan, but rather to finally clear his own name and his own future. Both of them shared the exact same burdens, but from completely opposite angles. Though both of their ancestors were world famous, Nolan's was through humiliation, whereas Roger's was through demonization. They both had the same exact last words, but yet there was a specific difference. See, Roger died proclaiming a great treasure existed somewhere called the One Piece, whereas Nolan died proclaiming a great treasure within the great city of gold, El Dorado, existed. They both even named their treasures that were the end of their recent journeys. So you could say Roger would have been a better YouTuber than Nolan, because I'd probably click on the One Piece over El Dorado. No offense to Nolan. But that's not the only reason why I say there's a difference. It all comes back to being a pirate. See, at both of their executions, neither one of them had
Am I
proof
going back
or
again?
could substantiate their claims, but yet they both died completely
no.
different deaths. But look at what happened at Nolan's death. For some reason, they set up Nolan with a random dude there to testify against Nolan and to break his truth. Is that a coincidence? No, that's something that is planned. They brought up a fake crewmate of Nolan's to essentially crucify him and make him a martyr. Why did they need to include this person? The kingdom already knew Nolan was a liar. Sure, the citizens may not have fully believed it, but the king was there. He saw that Nolan was a liar.
Yes.
What more would he need to want to execute him? But then, even more than that, Nolan went down in history as a liar, so much so that there were books written about him slandering his name and butchering his true story. And those stories persisted through generations, even until Cricket. Which, by the way, historical propaganda is a signature mark of a certain entity in One Piece. But you're probably by now like, okay, what's so special about this story? I knew all of this already. But again, let me ask you, who really killed Nolan? Was it the king of Luvniel? Was it the Skypian gods? Was it Nolan himself? Was it the knock-up stream? The correct answer is the knock-up stream, right? Because had that not happened, Jaya would still be on the blue sea and Nolan wouldn't be a liar. But it's actually deeper than that. In fact, I think Nolan was scheduled to die the moment he landed on Jaya. So let's walk back Nolan's story a little bit with more details. So in the year 1122, Nolan becomes the first intruders to land on Jaya and visit Shandora in 400 years, according to
going the right
Kalgara,
way. Am
which
I?
is an important note. But fast forwarding through Nolan's story, we get to an interesting panel here. After Nolan and Kalgara become homeboys
So
for life,
weird.
Kalgara brings Nolan to Shandora, where he basically says the treasure isn't the gold, it's the bell and the poneglyph that were held as the real treasure, so Nolan's crew can take all the gold they want. During the crew's search, they stumbled upon two things, an eternal pose and a map of Jaya. Kalgara says we must have taken that from invaders. Well, wait, that's really weird. Didn't Kalgara just say no one has visited the island in 400 years? So how did the intruders that never made it to the island have a map of Jaya? On top of that, the map has the hidden city Shandora mapped out on it. So again, if there were no visitors to the island and the Shandorans were largely isolated, how does an invader have a map like this if no one has been to the island in 400 years? Doesn't that mean this map is from the Void Century? And it's one thing to map out the outside, but the inside of it too? So who could have had this map? Well, we were given another clue. Along with it was an internal pose, and I'm assuming it's of Jaya. And guess what entity has the ability to take away log pose characteristics of islands and create eternal log poses without even being on the island? The world government. So those intruders might have been people in search of Shandora on behalf of the world government, and this gets amplified by something we found out a little bit later in the Nolan story. So Nolan leaves Jaya, right? The knock-up stream happens and Jaya's in the sky. And the rest is history, right? Wrong. That's not all that happens. So Nolan goes back to Luvniel country and informs the king about Shandora, the city of gold. The king becomes
There it is,
entranced
the
in the story,
boring
and then 5 years
Yes.
pass. And we see the king talk to Nolan saying they have finally gotten permission from Merijois to enter the Grand Line. From who? Yeah, the Holy Land, Merijois. But on top of that, Nolan is appointed to be the admiral of the exploration ship. But the king says none of Nolan's crew can come, and it's going to be the king and his soldiers. That's a very odd thing. Knowing how perilous the trip is, why would the king go himself, but also without the crew that made it there the first time? Does that seem like something you'd order for an exploration? I mean, in our history, let's think of Spain for example. When they granted permissions to explorers like Columbus, it's not like the kings and queens would just go on these expeditions too. And Nolan's story seems heavily tied to that of Raleigh, a man who wrote exaggerated stories of El Dorado, the city of gold. And the story shares a lot of similar elements to Nolan's. But that being said, the setup for Nolan's adventure back to Jaya was already sabotaged at the start. He didn't have his crew and had to protect the king. Their fleet lost ships on the journey, and Nolan even says we'll never survive with such hastily trained soldiers as a crew. I've got to at least keep this ship that the king's on afloat, to the death if I have to. So it's reasonable to assume that had not Nolan been the absolute legendary beast of a man, this was a death trip. Nolan and the king should have died, but Nolan pulled through for him to get to Jaya and see that it was gone. And the king was not happy about Jaya being gone. So then they return back and we see the staged execution of Nolan, where the fake crewmate basically crucifies Nolan. So if you can get the feeling already, this series of events definitely was not instigated by the king of Louveniel. Rather than the king, remember what I said before? They had to get permission from Mère Joie before this trip. So let me just give you a timeline real quick. Nolan lands on Jaya in 1122, and he makes it back to Louveniel the same year. 5 years later, in 1127, Louveniel and Nolan were approved to re-enter the Grand Line to see Jaya. And 1 year before, in 1126, is when the knock-up stream happened, shooting Jaya up into the sky. So let me ask you something. Isn't that another insane coincidence?
heck.
Nolan had 5 years back, and it just so happens that it took 5 years to get approval for this trip, and the year before they get the approval, the knock-up stream happens? No, that's not a coincidence. But if you don't agree yet, let's add some details. Do you know what happens every 4 years in the One Piece world? No? Well, it's fine, because I do. It's the Reverie, which I have a big note about at the end of this video. But yeah, the Reverie happens every 4 years in the One Piece verse, which given that since there were 5-year delay in Nolan's trip, that means there was a Reverie in that time. And actually we can calculate which one, and in two ways. Well, one, right now the current year in the One Piece verse is 1524, and so that means the Reverie that took place was in the year 1124, which is exactly 400 years ago,
Failed
which
10,
also
number
means it
3.
was the 100th Reverie that happened before the current time, which if you can't see why that's important, let me fill you
There
in
we
on that
go.
blank Reverie. That's probably when the king of Louveniel went to get the approval at the Holy Land. He had to justify this expedition somehow, which brings up an important point, at least more prevalent in the past. Countries aligned with the world government had to get approval for expeditions within the Grand Line? That's a very interesting thing, especially considering it's not like they gave any help. It's like purely regulatory. A point I'll bring up in my Void Century video that's coming up soon. But so this situation reminds me of the current Reverie. I don't imagine the king of Louveniel would bring this up at the round table, but somehow it would need to get approved. And at the current Reverie, Nefertari Cobra requested a special audience with the Gorosei, and this is their response to that. After clarifying what the Nefertari's relation is to the world government, they said, "Has he cottoned onto something? Let us pray it does not derail the talks." Even here, they are worried about certain information going public, and without spoiling, we see with the current manga just how much the Gorosei try to manipulate the media. So then with the king of Louveniel, I'd imagine a similar circumstance, except the Gorosei were probably way more on top of their game back then because there was a lot less things going on. So they set up a full plan to counteract Nolan. They approved of a voyage that was destined to fail, as they were the ones who probably said it has to be the king and Nolan who went on this trip. That was probably meant to wipe them out. As a failsafe, just in case they made it back and forth on the trip, they set up a false testimony to make sure Nolan would go down in infamy. But not just that, they didn't stop there. After Nolan's execution, books were released that further spread the word of Nolan, which when you think about it, right, Nolan was a world famous adventurer who probably inspired other adventurers, and that is probably what the world government wanted to diffuse. And they
There we
used
go.
Nolan to deter others from wanting to be an adventurer by pushing the agenda that being an adventurer isn't that great, and the greatest adventurer was full of lies, which is the exact same situation Roger had. They wanted to deter more pirates from
Wait, I have
completing the
to
full
write that down.
circumnavigation of the globe, but the difference was Roger was a pirate from the start. He chose his execution and his death, and so they didn't expect the exact opposite to happen, where rather than lowering people's motivations to become a pirate, they
Oh,
gave
come on,
Roger
bro,
the
meat.
perfect
Okay,
stage to
nice.
spark
One
the
more
great
meat.
pirate era. But at the end of the day, both
More
were
meat.
demonized thereafter by the world in various ways. But you're probably like, wait a second. Parvision, you missed something. Are you implying that the world government also is the cause of Jaya
Yeah,
going into the
this
sky?
video is
In other
very
words, the
good.
knock-up stream. And I mean, the shoe kind of fits, doesn't it? Let's think about this for a second. When Kalgara and his tribe experienced the knock-up stream, it was for the first time, it seemed. But to reinforce that point, Nolan was on Jaya for at least 1 month, and we know the knock-up stream happens 5 times a month. That means if the knock-up stream existed like it did in our current time, Nolan would have seen it at least 5 times, to the point where whenever we see the knock-up stream, it's literally a giant water laser beam that you really can't miss from the island. And Cricket was able to even track it, but we have not heard a single peep about this knock-up stream, nor the Emperor Cloud that Skypiea was on, as it would bring night during daytime, another very interesting point. So, despite all of that, we have no record of either. And you know, if you were a native to a land that commonly had giant laser water beams off the coast, that's something I would inform my new best friend, like, hey buddy, if you come again, just be careful of it turning nighttime randomly during the daytime, or sometimes the ocean decides to yeet anything nearby. But yeah, so now there's 2 points with this. We know the knock-up stream can move, but from our knowledge at this point, near Jaya the knock-up stream did not exist 400 years ago. But it conveniently did right after a reverie where a king might have unintentionally alerted the world government that they stumbled upon Jaya. Thereafter, not one, but 2 major coincidences lined up. The first one is not only did the knock-up stream happen conveniently right before Nolan's return expedition, but it was pinpointed on Shandora to the point where Cricket never mentioned a knock-up stream that was off the coast of modern Jaya, where Shandora would have been. Which kind of implies that the first knock-up stream was targeted, which is an incredibly crazy detail. If the Gorosei can control the knock-up stream, maybe that's why it took 2 years after the reverie to be able to activate whatever mechanism is behind the knock-up stream. Cricket gave us a soft theory of how it works. He says there's an enormous cavity beneath the sea, and through a fluctuation of cold and hot water, it creates a giant steam pressure thing. But the issue with this is, why does it move? Also in a semi-predictable pattern. This implies that it's not a geological occurrence, but something else. But we still don't have enough info on this. I mean, at one point I was like, what if it's just a giant whale or something? And I did catch on to a really interesting connection relating to snakes, but I'll save that for a smaller knock-up stream video. That being said, let's look at this from a different angle then. What was the result of the first knock-up stream? The first knock-up stream completely wiped an island, or part of an island, off the map entirely. Isn't there another place that we know of that the world government has claimed to have just disappeared from the map? Yeah, that would be God Valley. What if this is how the world government managed to wipe it from the map, and God Valley was the second place, if there weren't more in between, that this weapon was used against? But there might be a huge difference here. See, there were 2 coincidences, not just the knock-up stream hitting Shandora, but also the Emperor Cloud being positioned perfectly to catch Shandora. What would have happened if the cloud wasn't there? Wouldn't the entire island just crash back into the ocean and be destroyed? Maybe it even split up? Maybe something like the place on Balloon Terminal was God Valley. Maybe that's why we saw Kaido there at his introduction? But I'm just throwing out an idea. That being said, the movement of the Emperor Cloud is very interesting because it seems like it might migrate, and I wonder if it can be controlled. Maybe that power is Uranus? That sounds crazy, but I'll explain what I mean by this in a future video. So at the end of the day, I think it's a fair assumption to make that the Gorosei proactively took out Nolan, like they should have done to Roger. He survived their perilous trip, they shot the knock-up stream possibly, but then after they set up and forced the execution and the slander thereafter by propagating the news of Nolan the Liar, which again is their signature mark of manipulating the true history of the world. So now I want to add on some additional thoughts to this line of thinking. So a theory that I was formulating while I was making my Vanderdecken video, the Mad Tail thumbnail video, is that maybe there are other paths to the true history other than studying the poneglyphs. I think each generation there is some sort of trend that the Gorosei have to smother out in order to conceal the void history. See, in the line of thinking that the Gorosei used the knock-up stream to hit Shandora, I was thinking, isn't that way too aggressive? I mean, they didn't even do that with Ohara. But with Ohara, it was a bit different because they needed to destroy the knowledge to read the poneglyphs, knowing that they couldn't destroy the poneglyph itself. They had to confiscate it instead. But what's weird is that reading poneglyphs seems to be a trend in our timeline with Rox, Roger, Ohara, but with Nolan and Luvniel Kingdom, they shouldn't have had any worry about them reading the poneglyphs. So that's when I realized something really interesting. The trend in Nolan's time wasn't reading poneglyphs or pirating, it was simply adventuring, and a line stuck out to me. Kalgara's daughter asked who Nolan was. His crew responds, "He's an explorer. He's famous in our kingdom. He's also a botanist. He goes to uncharted islands all over the world, discovering new varieties of plants and studying them, and there are plenty of explorers that have interest in plants. It's an important role in any country." And I was like, wait, it's an important role in any country? That's interesting because we don't have any notable people in our timeline besides Heracles and Torino Kingdom that has a significant interest in botany. It's even more interesting because in my recent videos, I highlighted the increasing thematic when it comes to nature, Green Bull's powers, the forest god possibility, Emu also being in the Chamber of Flowers. And so I was thinking maybe the world government during Nolan's time used Nolan as an example to deter other people from becoming adventuring botanists just like they did with Roger and pirating, but failed, whereas with Nolan they succeeded. But even more than that, what if they did that because they were worried someone stumbling upon the Void Century through means that are unconventional to us but would make a lot of sense for the story? So the idea that poneglyphs aren't the only ways to learn the Void Century is actually supported by Roger. With the voice of all things, the poneglyphs may not be the only way to learn the Void history. Think about it. We have an example in story of someone learning about the Void Century without the glyphs. It's Momo. And not through Odin's journal, but instead Zunisha, an entity that existed in the Void Century, has told Momo key details about Joy Boy and associated details along with it. Zunisha itself is essentially a walking poneglyph. But then, what about the Sea Kings? They seem to be knowledgeable about Noah and the ancient past and ancient clans, and Shirahoshi and others can hear them. But imagine if Shirahoshi just asked them about the Void Century. I'd imagine they would know a lot. So here's another example of how someone could learn of the Void Century without poneglyphs. So why is this relevant to this theory? Well, let's bring it back to botany. Through studying botany, is there a way someone could reach the truth of the Void Century? Well, actually, I mean there's a huge one, which is devil fruits. I would imagine if you had a peak scholar like Professor Clover, but instead with botany, they would be able to crack the code of devil fruits. And who knows what truth that would unlock, since we are 1,053 chapters into the story and still have no clue about devil fruits. So there's that, but there's something even more vital. So there is something else special about Shandora, or ancient Shaya, that it might also have in common with a few key places, which is graveyards. Specifically on Shandora, there was the Forest of the Ancestor Trees. Kalgara's daughter says the souls of our ancestors who had died on this island over the past several centuries are said to dwell in them, guided there by the sound of the bell. They are white, holy trees. All of our ancestors who lived on this island ever since the age of Shandora watch over us from those trees. To us, the Shandians, the Forest of the Ancestor Trees was something precious, even sacred. We protected them as we would our own lives. This thematic is something that actually is in common with a lot of the islands that are specialties, like Fishman Island, Zo, and Wano. Wano, for example, has all the samurai, even Ryuma, buried and somewhat preserved with the internal graves. But that being said, another interesting note about the Forest of the Ancestors on Shaya is that they are white holy trees. I'm going to make a video in the future about the color white in One Piece. I mean, it's really crazy, like the white holy trees and then sun god Nika's form, and then also the white boars on Wano being the agents of God. But aside from all that, if this were really the case with these ancestor trees, that they actually house the souls of the ancestors from the ancient Shandora, then this is yet another way that if you had the voice of all things and were researching plants, you could maybe end up hearing the souls of the trees and they could tell you the true history of the world, which might be what the Gorosei were afraid of, rather than Nolan finding the poneglyph and reading it, because at the time it wasn't really known whether many people knew the text, since modern Ohara didn't exist and Wano was closed off. Which also makes me wonder if Brook could interact with the souls of these ancestor trees. If another similar situation shows up, maybe Elbaf will have more information in a similar form, like a graveyard. But by now you're probably tired hearing all these offshoots of this Nolan idea, but it's literally never ending. There's still more. So to cap off this ancestral talk, it's interesting because Shandora had these pure white holy trees creating the Forest of the Ancestors. Fishman Island had the Forest of the Sea, which was blessed with life, but was the graveyard for all the ships that have sunk in throughout the world, which is super interesting. It says all of the ships. And the land is apparently really fertile, indicated by the whale's presence. The Minks also had an ancestral land, but also have the Sulong form that when they're in the visual sight of the full moon, they access their ancestral memories and become full white. Then on Wano we have the Ringo graveyard, which has a bunch of weapons as tombstones essentially, and it's covered in white snow. Then with Sun God Nika, there might be another ancestral connection there with the pure white form. So that was an idea, but what I thought was more important was this next part. It seems like right now there's a common theme of the Gorosei burning things down that they don't like. Ohara got Buster called and burned to the ground. Then we're still unsure of what happened to Okyo Kingdom, Nami's place of origin, which seemed to share a similar fate, but also the kingdom is Tokyo Kingdom just backwards, so it shares a similar thing as Elbaf being Fable, but also this is another direct connection to Japan, so maybe somehow they're related to Wano. So it makes you wonder, is this part of their method of the Great Cleansing in this era? And it makes me wonder even more, what did they do back in Nolan's time? And that's when I thought of two things. Tree fever could have been a way the world government was instigating a great cleansing back in the day. The way Nolan's right hand described it was that it ravaged and destroyed many small kingdoms and islands. The other part of this line of thinking was, how did the Forest of Ancestors' holy white trees even get infected? According to Kalgara, they were isolated for 400 years with no visitors on the land. But somehow their most important section of forest got infected with an illness that was widespread outside of the island, which kind of implies that there was some sort of external interaction with Jaya. Or it could simply be a coincidental spawn of the exact same tree fever that Nolan experienced outside of Jaya, which is a little weird. But so let me get something out of the way before I get to Nolan's name stuff. So this is a really funny thought that I had. So I always joked about how it's funny that the world government demonized Roger as a pirate king, but in reality, he was just a man looking for rocks on islands. And the funny connection is that Roger's rival's name is Rocks. And this joke will be even funnier if you watch my Mad Tail video about the Mushroom Pirate King, which inspired this video actually. But so if Nolan was Roger's predecessor essentially, but rather than researching rocks, Nolan was a botanist that studied plants, what's really funny is that I found definitive proof that Vanderdecken, the original one, was probably a Kinokobito, which are a race of mushroom people. So that means Nolan's rival, had he had a fuller life, might have been a mushroom, which is ironic since he was a botanist, similar to the naming pattern with Roger's rival Rocks. And now that I brought up Vanderdecken, I think a slight addition to the previous theory that I want to make is that I think the original Vanderdecken might have been searching for Shandora, or El Dorado possibly, learning the news from the Reverie where Louvniel Kingdom would have divulged the information, but also maybe they just heard it from Nolan's book. The last line in Nolan's book said he theorized Jaya sunk, which is why Cricket was diving in the ocean to search for it. And it might be that Vanderdecken did the same thing, as part of his introduction song was saying that he was looking for sunken treasure specifically. Now to finally cap off this Nolan video with some ideas that might give some clarity to his name. So I think even if some of this theory is true, it makes a lot of sense that rather than pure misfortune, Nolan was instead a victim of the schemes of the Gorosei, which might sound odd considering the current sentiment that they are incompetent. But when you look back at Nolan's story, it really does make sense that the Gorosei had some involvement in his demise, which makes it feel like they gave Nolan the D-Clan treatment by demonizing and slandering them. It's also so crazy that it just happens that 100 reveries ago was perfectly timed within Nolan's story for this story to be implemented. Like, this is honestly sort of a laugh tale when you think about it. Once Cricket learned the truth of Nolan, he couldn't help but smile and cry, just like Roger did at Laugh Tale. But speaking about the Reverie, I was invited to this year's Reverie, Reverie X, hosted by JD Legend on July 8th. Which I'm really hyped for since I didn't even have my channel when the last Reverie happened, and here I am. Along with that, I will be hard pushing my backlog of theory videos that I have been talking about for a while. The next 2 weeks will be filled with exciting videos, so if you like this video so far, please like, share, and subscribe. Mainly share, to be honest, because when I tell you the upcoming Void Century video is absolutely bonkers, and it connects back to all of this, and I'm not exaggerating. Well, in general, most of my theories connect, but yeah, I can't wait to connect with you all through the Reverie, which is so exciting. But anyways, continuing on with the other connections. I think Nolan was actually a D-Clan member, which is something I was hinting at throughout this entire video, making his name possibly Nolan D. Mont Blanc, which would make his name share a similar system as Trafalgar D. Water Law. In Law's name, the D referring to the D-Clan obviously, but Law had said that the water in his name is his secret name that was kept for generations. Similarly,